Namaste Ashwini ji and Vijay Shankar ji. This is Anand Rao from CTARA. Just like to welcome you to CTARA and thanks for doing this seminar for us.
Mr. Vedari is going to join. He hasn't got the link, he's saying. So, Sudha, somebody can you forward the link or should I do it?
Sudha, do you have his email?
Viju, this is NC.
Hello. Hi, NC. Hi.
Yeah, the point is, there's a passcode called CTARA, which he has to do that with cap locks, like it's all capitals. So please tell him to do that.
No, I didn't have to do anything. I just clicked from the link and I came on.
But I had to do it.
Oh,
so
okay.
Maybe that's the problem. CTARA.
No, he's not able to find the link. He's saying he's not able to find the link at
all. Oh, so Sudha, can you send it again then?
Or should I forward? I mean, I can also look.
Yeah, just forward it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have forwarded. So I think Ved might join now.
Okay.
Anyway, Ashwini is here. So I was saying she's also part of a research team only. So it's good. So we can, yeah.
Right.
But just let's wait for 2 minutes. I mean, in case Ved comes on.
Sudha, has it started or because I'm little late?
No, we're waiting for you.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
We're waiting for you, Procesha.
Ved is just coming. He's just joining. Yeah.
Hello?
Sir, am I audible?
Yeah, okay. Mr. Vedaria is just coming in, so we can start. Yeah.
Okay, sir. I'm starting. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to CTARA seminar series. Today we have two speakers with us, Vijay Shankar sir and Vedarya sir. And I'll be introducing the speakers now. Vijay Shankar sir is the founder member of Samaj Pragati Sahyog, an NGO based in Devas district of Madhya Pradesh. And he has lived and worked among the tribal communities of the Narmada Valley for over 30 years. His area of interest are watershed management, sustainable agriculture, and community-based people's institutions. And he has been a member
Hello,
of 12th
Sudha.
Plan.
Has it started? Because I was late and I didn't get a proper link.
So it has
Hello.
started, sir. I'm introducing. Vijay Shankar sir was a member of the 12th Plan Working Group on Natural Resources Management and Rain-Fed Farming and Working Group on Sustainable Groundwater Management set up by the Planning Commission. And he has been a member of expert group for the formulation of the state water policy of government of Madhya Pradesh in 2019. Vijay Shankar sir has been a visiting scholar at the Center for Advanced Study of India, University of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, USA, and is currently adjunct faculty at Center for Public Affairs and Critical Theory, Shiv Nadar University, Delhi. He has been elected as the member of Research Advisory Committee of the Indian Society of Agricultural Economics. I'll be introducing Vedarya sir, who has been a serial social entrepreneur and has founded Srijan, SIDS, and Buddha Fellowship Program, and is also the founder of RCRC Coalition. He was conferred Distinguished Alumnus Award by IIT Kanpur for 2020, and he's a member of Technical Group on Social Stock Setup, Securities and Exchanges Board of India. Business Standard chose Ved sir as a social entrepreneur of the year 2018. He has been a member of policy-making bodies like Advisory Committee, Promotion of Producers Enterprise, Ministry of Rural Development, Government of India, and has been working in the group of National Advisory Councils in September, July 2012 and 2013. Buddha Fellowship Program, recently launched by Veda, has the mission to groom 1,000 talented youth as development entrepreneurs to transform the lives of 5 million poor families by 2028. On behalf of CTARA, I welcome both of you, sir. And we may begin the session now.
Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. So very happy to be back in CTARA again, talking to all of you. My colleagues, Ved and Ashwini Kulkarni, he's also part of a research team. Both of them are here. So we'll be just basically talking about the kind of research initiative, basically survey initiative post-COVID, as part of this RCRC coalition, Rapid Community Response to COVID Coalition, which has come up under the leadership of Vedarya. So I'll request Ved first to start off the discussion. I have a presentation, I'll come to that. Before that, Ved can briefly introduce RCRC Coalition and the survey and research efforts they're doing. Over to you, Ved. Yeah.
Thank you, Viju, and thank you, Sudha, and thank you, CTARA. And CTARA is not new to me and vice versa. And I know Professor Narayanan and Professor Satish Agnihotri and Professor Damani. And so it's a pleasure to come back, and of course in new strange conditions that we have to be on Zoom rather than face-to-face. But Zoom has been a boon for RCRC because we've had so many webinars, so many meetings. Only because of Zoom we could meet so frequently, and that has been the case with many people as well in the world. I want to welcome also Ashwini Kulkarni, who's a member of our working committee, the leadership team in RCRC. Very briefly, as some people say, there never, waste a crisis. So we came together in COVID crisis, and the pandemic was there, then the lockdown was imposed. So we thought, can NGOs, civil society organizations do something together to reach relief for communities that have been stuck in the rural areas because of lack of transport and transport impositions and restrictions of transport, or to migrants. And so we came together, initially 7 people, then 20, and then finally 66 organizations are together. And I don't want to name anybody, the list is huge, but there's Pragati Abhiyan, there's SPS, AKRSP, Pradhan, Sijan, you name it in the livelihood sector, we are there barring a few. Together, we reach 1.6 crore rural families, people in the country in 15 states. We have not to boast so much, but to say that we actually devolve a lot of work on the ground. Together, our annual grants are about 1,300 crores. So that is the kind of work we are able to do. So we thought about not only reaching relief, but we thought it is important to know what is happening on the ground, us ourselves, because individually every organization would know. From the most important frontline worker is community resource persons. All of us have them, and community institutions like SHGs and FPOs are also our frontline institutions that work very closely with panchayats as well. But people sitting in Niti Aayog, or people sitting in the PMO, people sitting in the Ministry of Rural Development, and the rest of us in the urban people, and did not know what was going on. So from that arose the need to do a survey, basically monitoring the lives of rural people during COVID and lockdown. That was the original motivation to find out. And it's so funny to say it today, but we started to think very idealistically. We'll do every week. Every week we'll find out, every week we will tell people, this is what is happening. Actually, that was a reaction to the urgency. That was a reaction to the, how poor people were suffering. So that is how I think it was an emotional, this thing. But at the same time, I think we are able to do 3 rounds of survey, and for a network to do it, it's really amazing. I can say it's thanks to organizations, the members, 40 to 45 organizations participated in this. So therefore, we are very, very pleased to get this opportunity to speak to all of you. And Viju has been a core member of the research team, because in the RCRC, we have a organizational structure. We follow the principle of distributional equity. It's not a secretariat model in the sense one set of people sitting in Delhi do it, but we building on the capacities and expertise of the leaders within the RCRC, we try to see that those advantages should come to RCRC and to the rest of the world. So in research, it is Viju, Binoy who have led the effort, and I'm so glad that we have Viju with us. Is one of the most articulate people anyway, and he's an avid researcher. We also want to say that it is not enough to do research unless the results reach out to public. And in that context, I want to bring Ashwini, because Ashwini writes also very frequently, particularly in the Marathi media. So I'm very glad to have Ashwini. I want to introduce her as a very valued member of RCRC. She's also a member of the leadership team. With those words, I would like to also say that every opportunity we present our results is also a learning opportunity, particularly in academic institution. So we would look forward to critique and criticism by which we can learn. And because we want to now also do it next year, we are planning for 4, if not 4, 3 community surveys next year also. That is also a good news I want to share, that a certain donor has been so excited about the research work that they have promised to give research grant to RCRC for next year as well. So we'll come to you for advice, because I have forgotten no academic rigor I have, many of us don't have. So it's good to have an academic institution to present. Please tear it apart from whichever angle you want to come from. We would be very happy to receive feedback from you, all of you, including Dr. Narendrashah and others of my colleague here. Thank you very much, Viju, for asking me to speak.
Thanks, Ved. We will go into the presentation right now. The context of this today's dialogue is that because I was discussing with Dr. Narayanan about some of the findings that we have been able to get together through this kind of survey effort that we are talking about. So the conversation was that a lot of results are coming from the RCRC research is entirely done through our partners located in different parts of the country. So the idea is also that many of you are young people, students, you have come from, many of you are from rural background. So you will also be interested in knowing this kind of this thing, how the pandemic crisis has evolved in the rural areas. And the hope that we at RCRC have is that you will also be able to sort of do some kind of work of this type, maybe some kind of a survey of this type. And if anybody is interested as an individually, as a group, or CTARA as a organization, we are happy to share all our questionnaires and all our information with you, with whatever we have done. The main point about our CRC survey, which I mentioned, this is entirely done by partners. I will come to that methodology, how we did it. The point is that whatever information has come from the ground, and as Ved is saying, it has value. It's a lot of value if it goes into policy, but it has much greater value if it goes back into their partners and sort of informs their own work. So that's the way we have positioned our research, and we want to take it forward. Next, within the period of next 1 year, we want to do at least 3 more rounds of these surveys. These are large sample surveys. At least the first round we did had around 11,000 people. Second round had reached up to around 17,000. Third round still has around 11, 12,000. These are very large number sample surveys, and which kind of academic rigor that people like Professor Shah and Dr. Narayanan, etc. will have. We can actually work on the questionnaires a little more, make them more rigorous, and collect sample also more rigorously, and get to some very good results. Basically, we found that in the last over 3 rounds, we are able to sort of track a trajectory of rural communities who first went into a COVID situation and then gradually coming out of it. So I'll just open my presentation, and I think I'll not speak. The presentation, as I was saying, is a bit large, so I will not probably go into all those things. I'll probably speak about some 20-25 minutes, maximum half an hour. After that, we can have some discussion on it, and if there are more questions, we'll be happy to discuss further. So I'll just open my share my screen for the presentation. Is it visible?
It is visible, Viju.
Acha, okay, yeah. So we'll just a minute. Yeah. So this is the RCRC Center for Monitoring Rural Areas. This is a kind of vision that Ved has, that having done this survey, where do you go from here? What is your long-term goal? We want to set up something like a Center for Monitoring Rural India, something somewhat parallel to CMI. I mean, it may look a bit ridiculous also, because RCRC has strength which can go much beyond CMI. Something like that we want to set up, which regularly throws up information about rural areas. So in our surveys that we did, the 3 rounds of survey, basically we can say we pursued or looked at 3 questions. First was, what is the impact of COVID-19 on different aspects of rural economy? So the way we saw it at RCRC was the rural economy was already facing a lot of issues. It had going through a number of problems before the COVID crisis itself. But this crisis in a way brought out many of those weaknesses, or the fault lines, one should say, of the rural areas into open. So what are the fault lines, and how did this COVID crisis affect different people, especially people like migrants, tribal people, people who are vulnerable sections like women, backward castes, etc., and also people living in remote, the kind of outside the so-called mainstream, in remote, distant kind of areas. So what is the impact of this crisis on different sections of the people? That's what the first question that we sort of raised. And second was, along with the story of in what ways crisis affected the society, we also wanted to look into the ways in which communities have dealt with the crisis. What are the community response? RCRC ka jo second R is about community response. So community response comes individually or as communities together, or more strongly in terms of people, institutions, like you have many of us who work with SHG federations and producer groups, producer companies, and also Gram Panchayats, locally decentralized units. And government has come out time and again with various kinds of programs like PM Kisan, this Jan Dhan Yojana, Ujala Yojana, a lot of schemes government has come out with. Through all that, what has been the response of the communities to the crisis, and how have these institutions played a role. So we are happy to report that at the end of the, after having done 2 or 3 rounds, we find that many of the communities have actually, community institutions have played a significant role in terms of dealing with the crisis and minimizing the crisis. And some programs like government's, this public distribution system, it has a lot of weaknesses, but still it is a large program which covered a lot of people and was very beneficial when compared to this kind of cash transfer schemes we had, like PM Kisan, etc. Kisan Samman, so on. And one big message which coming out of surveys also, massive revival of MGNREGA. MGNREGA program was not working very well before that. There had a lot of problems in different parts of areas, particularly in states like Madhya Pradesh, where I myself work. But due to this COVID crisis, the whole thing is, I mean, there's been a complete revival of MGNREGA, which is a very good thing that you find. Well, people like Ashwini will be very happy to note about that. And that revival has actually helped rural communities negotiate this crisis in several ways. The third question related to both was that if you want to make the response collectively strong, if this has been the history of the response, how to make it stronger, what need to be done? So what can the communities do? And looking at it, COVID from a disaster management perspective, this is one disaster which has come in. Supposing more disasters come like this in future, how do we negotiate that? What can we do about that? That is the third question that we try to look at. And the questionnaires that we developed initially and we pursued over 3 rounds had largely 7 integrated modules. Each had some large, the questionnaire was quite long. It was around 105, 110 questions on each of these themes which are listed here. The first one, most immediate question was about migrant labor. We had the stories of so many people losing jobs and coming back to rural areas. So we wanted to capture dimensions of migration. Then income, wages, and employment related to those, loss of income, loss of wages, and how has NREGA tried to sort of ameliorate that crisis. Third thing was about liquidity crisis, because if income loss and job loss happens at the household level, there'll be a tremendous shortage of funds. And how have household managed that? And has access to credit from sources like banks and cooperatives, have they helped them, or did they have to depend on informal sources? And worse still, did they have to go into pawning their assets? I mean, toward the end of the presentation, there's some evidence to show that many households, not too many, because a large sample survey, the number comes out as very significant. As a percentage, it may still be very small. But at least 5 to 10% of the household that we surveyed regularly across rounds have reported that they had to pawn their household assets, including at times part of their land also, and ornaments and their property. So this is also leading to kind of a loss of wealth at the household level. And fourth point that we wanted to look at is outreach government programs, what I mentioned just now, Jan Dhan, PM Kisan Samman, Ujjwala, etc., and PDS. And tentatively, we had one issue we wanted to follow through, was the issue of PDS versus cash transfers. I mean, this is a debate which is raging at the national level. How are these two function? And our result, tentative result over 3 rounds, show that PDS has done much better. Outreach of PDS still has a lot of issues, but it has performed much better than cash transfer in terms of reaching out to people. Then fifth module is about livelihood activities. As you know, when crisis struck, when the pandemic and the lockdown happened, our agriculture and livestock economy both collapsed. And how did it go through the collapse, and how did rebuilding happen? Then last 2 modules are about health and mental health. Health is about all the people, the service providers, frontline workers of health, were all withdrawn into COVID treatment. The non-COVID disease burden seemed to have increased among the households. And that also has led to a lot of mental health issues, like tensions growing up in the house, alcoholism, a lot of issues that has been reported. So we want to capture these aspects. So this is what we were trying to capture through our survey, the 7 modules. The methodology was somewhat like this, that survey was undertaken through RCRC coalition partners. These are NGOs working in different parts of the states. So one can say sample is not actually a random sample or a stratified random sample. It's actually what can be called a purposive sample. We have gone by the presence of our CSO partners. So from a sampling framework view, we have framework. We have actually pursued, we have actually gone to those areas where we have people responding. That way, there may be a bias in the kind of responses that we have got. But our idea was that our purpose was not to sort of do a general kind of study. We are all practitioners working in the field. So we also wanted results to help our partners themselves. So we are collecting information from partner that should go back to them. So we actually, this selection bias or whatever you call it, is inbuilt into the survey is because we are primarily people who are practitioners, not from doing an academic study only. And the second round of survey, which was first round was done in May 2020, second round was done in July 2020, and third round was completed around December 2020. Those are the 3 rounds, and we'll be going to the 4th round fairly soon. The second round covered 11 states, 80 districts, 169 blocks, and 17,000 respondents. That's the highest number that we have reached. And sampling frame was like this: 5 villages per block and 2 blocks per district, about 100 respondents per block, and every household, a 5th household will be surveyed and cover as many hamlets as possible, and include all socioeconomic groups. And data collection period was between July. And we also used the instrument called Survey CTO, which is an online kind of instrument to collect information, in which both information collection as well as tabulation happens. You remember this July is a time of lockdown. Mobility was very restricted. So many of the surveys were conducted on mobile by the people working in the field, our own community resource persons and so on. So whatever data they collected, they were transferring onto this instrument, which is also can be operated through a mobile phone. And that's the way data has been collected. In third round, things started opening up. So we were able to do much more interviews in person and so on. This is how the second round was done. And organizations like Srijan, which is the organization by Vedarya, SPS, my own organization, and Ashwini's organization, Pragati Abhiyan, all of us participated in this survey. Our own community resource persons have gone into our villages and collected information from them. The third round, again, we worked with 43 coalition partners in different parts of the states. 11 states were covered, 64 districts, 128 blocks, and around 11,766 responding households. Sampling frame was the same, not much difference. Other things were all the same. And survey instrument also was roughly the same. The sample number has come down a little bit because second round had some quality issues. Though we got large number, we had to reject many of those responses because they were not, the data was either contradictory or unclear. So we did not use much of that. So third round onward, we decided that we would not go for very large numbers. We'll select our partners carefully and try to get as rigorous data as possible. There are some ideas going further how to streamline this further. Because between the first round and second round and third round, respondents change. So the question is that, are you doing a timeline survey of the same household, or are you doing, surveying whoever comes to your contact? So we would say we are doing a mix of both. We try to keep around 30 to 40 households common and some blocks common between different rounds of survey. For example, third round, we have covered 128 blocks, out of which I think 60, right? With 60 blocks are common, I think, which were done in the first and second rounds, I think.
Correct,
so,
correct.
Yeah, some blocks have remained, and 30 to 40% of the beneficiaries also will be, the respondents also will be similar. So that will give a timeline perspective also, as well as some kind of an overall picture of how things happen. This is how the methodology of the thing. We'll now go into some of the quick results which came out. This is how the survey has been done, the third round survey.
Sir, sorry to disturb you. Can we please go for the full screen mode, because it's getting a little difficult for YouTube viewers.
Okay. Full screen, is it visible now?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, full screen, it was not, it doesn't come on, that's why I didn't do it. Yeah. Okay, so this survey was, these are our partners. RCRC partners are mostly concentrated in Northern India. We had some few South Indian partners also, but the outreach was not very much. So it's largely these states are the ones most represented by our the kind of information that we have. We had large sample from UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, and Rajasthan, and somewhat less number of sample from Orissa, Maharashtra, and northeastern regions also we had. So this is roughly the layout of the respondents coming from different states. And first round and second round, we had a lot of women respondents also, but the gender focus was somewhat less there in the first two rounds. So RCRC has a gender subgroup. So they went through our questions. I mean, people like Ashwini also sat with us, and they are all part of the gender group. So they vetted many of our questionnaire and included many questions which are relevant for women, and we are able to increase, therefore, the representation of women. The respondents, about 63% of the respondents in our third survey, something like 7,448, were women respondents. And there were some specific questions related to women's work, etc. So we are able to achieve a good kind of a gender balance. In fact, a positive gender balance we are able to achieve in terms of responses. By social category, as you can see, many of us are working with vulnerable groups. We are NGOs working in the most deprived and vulnerable kind of parts of India. So naturally, those sections have got a very heavy kind of weightage in our sample, and rightly so, because those are the most deprived or most sort of vulnerable communities. And if the impact on them is severe, then you can imagine that the most severest impact one can expect will be visible there. So 35% of our sample in the third round covered OBCs as tribals, because many of us work, including my own organization, work in tribal areas. 33% was our sample represented tribals, Adivasis, and 21% had Dalit representation. And there was 1%, 63%, 63 households who did not want to reveal their sort of caste background. The total around 11,766. So it's predominantly a survey of vulnerable communities located in vulnerable places. Then we go to the first question, which is about migrants. So we had in the this thing, we got some numbers about migrants. About 2,917 out of the total, around 25% of the respondents were migrants. This person is somewhat proportion is somewhat lower in the third round of survey. Second round, the proportion was a bit higher. And as can be imagined, Bihar, Orissa, etc., had very large proportion of accounted for a large proportion of migrants, and the proportion of migrants reported from the northeast and Maharashtra were somewhat less. In terms of social category, again, a very large preponderance of OBCs and tribals among the migrants, because that's governed by our own sample itself. And we asked several questions to the migrants. I mean, I did not bring all the slides here; they would have made it too long. One question, which is not response, which is not covered here, is that what was the reason for migration? And around, I think, 65 to 70% of the migrants said that they had to migrate because they had nothing to do in the villages where they came from, lack of resources at their home states. So in a way, distress migration is the main thing that we find here. Aspirational migration, or people migrating on their own or in search of higher income, would be around 25 to 30%. So most of these people are distress migrants. And in terms of the duration of migration, 67%, 2/3 of our sample reported that they had to they stay for less than 6 months, but they have ties with their own villages, but they go out for some time, but they come back. What we call seasonal migration. That accounted for a substantial number of migrants here. And among these seasonal migrants also, Dalits and OBCs and Adivasis had a predominant share as in the overall migrant sample. This third round of survey, we asked specifically about the gender composition of migrants. We found that 57% of the migrants were adult males, and 18% were adult females, and there were a lot of children also migrating. So in some, we have more detailed data on this. At times, the whole family migrates. I mean, husband, wife, and the child, children migrate together. At times, wife stays back, husband only migrates. The different patterns are there, and some of them are very state-specific also. So on the whole, the meaning is that there's a lot of female migration also happening. I mean, because this round was, we are primarily focusing on the gender aspects of migration also we wanted to capture. We found that a lot of adult females are also migrating, and specific questions were asked to them about the situation they had to undergo during the process of migration, during lockdown, and during the process of returning. I mean, the phenomenon was that when lockdown and pandemic happened, a lot of migrants returned to the villages. Then after the opening up started, they returned, they went back. I mean, so re-return of migrants. So that also phenomenon is also happening. So we wanted to look at the situation of the migrants in terms of their income level. So Sorry. So our sample showed that 81% of the migrants that we surveyed, the people in our sample, had income less than 10,000 rupees or something. And 20% of the sample had income as low as 2,500 per month. This is the kind of income they were getting even after migration. So one can imagine, out of the majburi, out of helplessness, they had to migrate. And it is not as if they were doing very well in their host destinations also, wherever they had gone. They were not doing very well there. And after the COVID struck, they had to come back to the villages. And we then asked questions about the people who returned, the returned migrants, the images of which had come in our newspapers and our TV and various media. We found that a lot of migrants had returned during around 74% of the migrants that we surveyed who had gone out from their villages, and of which 74% had come back because they had to come back. And not that they wanted to, because of lockdown, they had no work there. They were forced to come back. And the highest percent of returned migrants were in Jharkhand and Orissa. And there are some instances, I think, of people, migrants from Jharkhand coming back even as far as Kerala, coming back from Kerala. There were some reports of that time. And Rajasthan also reported a large number of migrants coming back. And as can be expected, a major part of the people who came back were tribals and OBCs. And the general category was in general much lower. So there's the issue of returned migrants were there. Then we asked the question, now, having come back to the village, what do you do in the village once you come back? So this pie chart shows that the situation in December, this is from the third survey. It showed that a lot of them, many of them were actually working as casual laborers in the village in works other than MGNREGA. Some were working in as attending to their own farms and so on, as working as farm labor. Around 30% of the people were not working. So, and another interesting finding that we found was that only 5%, I mean, the figure is written here is 3, the pie chart shows 5%. Only 5% of the people who returned, here about 2,400 families had come back, to migrant workers had come back in our sample, some 25-30%, of which only 5% had got into MGNREGA. This was a revelation for us. This pattern continued in our first, second, and third, or throughout the surveys. So this the kind of statement that we would imagine that, like, people like NC Narayanan and Ashwini would be interested to know, that we would normally imagine that people who, when they come back, they have no work to do, they would have got into MGNREGA, but that does not automatically happen. They did not happen. Many of them did not happen, and this led us to think why this happens. I think the difference, the reason is the difference in the skill sets. People who migrate or go out, etc., work as in the service sector or urban areas where people will work, they naturally think that they are not, they are more skilled people. They are not unskilled sort of manual workers. So they don't want to go back and get back into manual work. Other side of it, they actually critically lack the skills that a manual worker requires. Manual work also is not very simple job, as you know. If you and I start digging, we won't be able to sustain ourselves for very long. And working hard in the manually in the field requires certain set of skills, which probably the returned migrants lacked. And anyway, 30% of them are not working, but not getting into NREG or any other employment. Further exploration revealed that these people are actually waiting. They are actually waiting for the lockdown to come down, COVID pandemic to go down, so that the urban areas open, so that they're able to go back. Wage comparison, this again not a very solid data. This we just asked people. So many of them reported that the post-COVID income wage level has gone down, which actually talks about the cash crunch that household must be facing. And this is about engagement with NREGA. The good news was that even though the returned migrants are not getting into MGNREGA, all around the place, wherever we surveyed, all the states, the numbers are there. It showed that there's been a massive revival of interest in NREGA and spending in NREGA. Government increased allocation for NREGA from around 65,000 crores to 115 crores last year. And this year again, 70,000 crores has been allocated in the current budget. So that is absorbing a lot of people because people are showing a lot of interest. And separately from this, I've also done some analysis of the data from MGNREGA. We find that the proportion of individual works, like houses and toilets, etc., into which NREGA program has been largely diverted, has been corrected to some extent during the last 1 year. And there's an increased proportion of community works at the NREGA portal, the large India as a whole. So if you look at our own sample, 84% of the assets created were reported as community assets. So there's been a shift in MGNREGA away from a welcome shift away from individual-oriented work towards community-oriented work, and coupled with an all-round revival of MGNREGA. Around 20-30% days of employment on an average were reported, which is quite substantial. And as you know, the main period of MGNREGA work is after December. So when we do our next round of survey, we will specifically focus on MGNREGA. We'll get more evidence of the NREGA revival. But this is very good news that there's one program which has come in. In fact, this is the only program the government probably had to address distress at a very large scale. So there's been a massive revival of MGNREGA, which is one of the good news coming out of our survey. Then about other programs, PDS I just now mentioned. During our surveys, I mean, this is only showing about result of one survey, the third round. In our second round, also in third round, a lot of people reported that access to rations have not been uniform. Some states are there where the ration availability has been very low, and only 50% of the people that we surveyed of the total sample said that they got the 3 or more times ration. This is we are talking about the free ration, which the government had announced after the lockdown. They had said that they'll give the ration in several months. So when we surveyed, we found that only 50% got ration for 3 or more times, and there were many 8% of households who never got any supply for ration. Only 11% only got it once. So all said and done, the outreach of PDS program had a lot of issues, but it did cover a lot of people also. We found the result was a bit mixed. So as a program, one can say PDS had done much better than cash transfer. And the weakness in PDS, if any, why it's not able to reach out people, let's say in places like Northeast, etc., is because civil society action is not very strong. So this is a message that we can take to policymakers also, that there are weaknesses in PDS which need to be corrected, but also to our society partners that they need to strengthen their advocacy a lot more to get this benefit to their people. And one more related to this, we found that food intake, I mean, this is a kind of a bit of a repeated kind of a finding from our different surveys. Round 2, we found that many households, about 40% of the households that we surveyed reported that they had to reduce food intake. And as you can typically imagine, this happened, I mean, tribal communities and SCs led the way in terms of cutting down on food. And you can imagine how cutting down on food will happen. People, instead of eating 3 times a day, would eat only probably twice or postpone their meals. That's one way of they manage it. And within household, because there's a gender discrimination within the household, it's likely that the males get more food and females go hungry a lot more. That is also quite likely. So that also seemed to have happened, and there is people cutting down food has been reported in our survey number 2, which was in July. And in December, again, we found that the phenomenon continues. There is an all-round cash job loss and income loss, which has affected cash availability at the household level. So households had to, people who did not have access to PDS, etc., had to cut down their food consumption and go hungry. And that would have also, as I just now mentioned, the gender dimension. This whole problem continues, which means that a lot more action need to be done on strengthening PDS and making nutrition available to households. And you know, these are investments which have a very long-term impact. I mean, undernutrition will not appear in one month or 6 months or something. If people do not eat food now, this consequence of that will be long-lasting. It can last 5 to 6 years to come. And the impact of this is like going to last a long way before the, after the COVID impact. So this is one of the long-term impacts that we can probably foresee from our survey, against which I think policy action is urgently required. And we went further into the question of what exactly is the food they have cut out. I mean, if in our survey on a lighter tone, we would not have minded if they had cut down on alcohol consumption or tobacco consumption or consumption of those kind of things. But we found that people are actually consuming less of nutritious foods. the 5,207 households who reported cutting down on food, many of them said, 62% said that we had to cut down on vegetables, and 54% said we had to cut down on oil consumption. So the nutrition is also, apart from food intake, nutrition aspect also is going to get badly affected. You can imagine this consumption of egg, meat, and fish, the kind of luxury foods have been cut down massively by 63%, vegetable by 62%, milk by 55%, and many other things. Compared to that, alcohol consumption has only been cut down by 29%. I think because of the mental health issues, etc., consumption may even have gone up. So it is double whammy. Then PM Kisan Samman Yojana, we tried to pursue it in round 2. We found that 42% of the households were eligible for this money. Under PM Kisan, the government was supposed to pay out 6,000 rupees a month in 3 installments, 2,000, 3 installments they were supposed to give. The household, there's a certain eligibility criteria. 42% of the households were eligible, but only 52% of the 52% of even those people who were aware, even those people who were eligible were aware of the benefit itself, and only a small portion of them seem to have actually got the benefit of this Kisan Samman Yojana. So this is a cash transfer scheme. That's what I was saying, that if you compare PDS with cash transfer, with all its defects and drawbacks, PDS seem to have done still a lot better than any cash transfer scheme. I did not mention Jan Dhan here. Jan Dhan is a very small payment. Even if that has happened, that will not make a very significant difference in the community level. We found that the working of Jan Dhan is also not all that great. Then coming down to livelihood sectors, I'll take about 5-10 minutes more. Talking about the livelihood sectors in the round 2, which was in July, the major question was that where did people market the Rabi crop, wheat, which they had done. As you know, lockdown came just after about the time when the Rabi harvest was about to happen in the middle of March. After Rabi harvest was done, mobility, everything was limited. So what happened? Where did people sell? And it's also related to the current national controversy about farmer agitation and the outreach of MSPs, even the knowledge of MSPs, how many farmers get it, and how many farmers actually get to sell to government. We found that only 11% of the respondents surveyed, around a sample of something like 17,000 households, only 10% around were able to sell their Rabi produce to government. Rabi produce is a crop like wheat, which has a massive procurement operation happening in Madhya Pradesh and parts of UP also. Even then, the procurement coverage was only, public procurement coverage was only 11%. 4% sold their entire amount to government procurement, but 70% opted out not to sell to government and sold outside. And we also found that around 2/3 of the farmers that we surveyed, this is not about the entire sample, the farmer households in the sample that we surveyed, they're not aware of the minimum support price. So MSP is a very vital issue in Punjab because farmers are getting the benefit out of it, but many other places people do not even know what MSP is and they are not getting any benefit out of it. That is the situation that we find here. But 43% of the households knowing about MSP, about 1,000 households reported that actually got MSP benefit procurement. As you can be imagined, most of these people are in Madhya Pradesh, where decentralized procurement has done wonders after 2008. I mean, the procurement operation has been very, very widespread after 2008. Then in round 3, this is a time around December. That time the Kharif crop was over and Rabi crop was over. The Kharif crop was ready for sale. We again asked the same question. We found that major Rabi crops, Kharif crops sold were paddy, maize, pulses, and millets, and soybean also, again in Madhya Pradesh. 43% of the farmers sold their Kharif produce through local traders. Again, the government procurement was very low. As you can imagine, none of these things are actually procured by the government in any of these states. Paddy procurement happens mostly in Punjab, Haryana, and in Andhra Pradesh or in Orissa. So the little bit of share which is reported of this thing, 18% which is sold in APMCs, that part of that could be in states like Orissa, etc. And direct government purchase, nobody has reported. I think probably it might have got confused with mandi sales of it. And 25% of the respondents said that they got MSP above, they got a price above MSP, which means that 75% of the persons have not got a good price for their crop. And 33% of the respondents said that the prices were lower than the previous Kharif. As you can imagine, as a situation of limited mobility and excess supply at a rural level, the prices would have crashed, and that would have also affected farmers' income in various ways. This round, we also asked some questions about seed availability because seed was very important for the Kharif crop. We wanted to see whether the Kharif cultivated area is the same as the previous year. I think our overall results showed, there are various numbers here, but the overall result is that Kharif area-wise, there is no decline. If you look at year-to-year, time on year-on-year comparison, if you make between Kharif of 2021 and 20, there's no reduction in area per se. But people are aware of the people got seeds from, or the input from. And next thing is about input fertilizers. We find that many of these things are not purchased from any open market. People did not have money. So many of them were taken on credit. So households' overall loan situation has gone bad. So while area under cultivation, farming has not really declined, or agricultural production has happened, what has happened is that households had to go out and borrow a lot more than what they would have done otherwise. The second question, the question that naturally follows is, where did the people borrow from? They needed so much money. Did they go to a bank, or did they use services like Kisan Credit Card or something, or did they have to depend on informal markets? So our round 2 and the round 3, the slide which is going to come, revealed that Kisan Credit Card outreach is very, very limited, which means that availability of bank credit at the crucial time was extremely short in supply, much less than what was required. This RCRC is taken under Wade's leadership. We have taken it as one kind of argument to policy intervention in NABARD, etc. is required for this. We have said that at the time when credit was most required, households were actually going through a cash crunch. Credit supply was not forthcoming, which forced people to go and borrow from informal markets at exorbitant rates of interest. So overall, household situation would have, poverty, etc., would have got affected much more because of this. And the same situation we continues in December also, in Kharif season also. People had to borrow a lot. I mean, the borrowing a certain time, the kind of use of credit card was not very significant, which means that people had to did not get credit from the formal sources. They had to depend on informal credit from money lenders and so on. So the outreach of KCC is very limited. For NGO partners that we work with, this is in a way a low-hanging fruit. There's already government program of ensuring KCC to farmers. We have to activate that and work more intensively with banks, etc., so that credit availability at the household improves. Then about cash crunch, I mean, we asked again households about the kind of liquidity crunch they have felt, and where exactly have they felt the shortage the most. As you can imagine, food items are the things in which cash crunch, the immediate impact of cash crunch was felt. And a lot of farmers, especially a lot of households, especially farming households, reported that they needed credit or money for agricultural activities that was not forthcoming, because of which they had to go and take loans. And medicines also cost a lot, because this is actually non-COVID medicines. I mean, the attention of the entire nation was on COVID mitigation. So many of the non-COVID diseases, particularly like waterborne diseases and typhoid and those kind of things, multiplied in rural areas. We have some data on the death statistics also, which we have not. I mean, we need to look at it in more detail. But in general, one can say that household position in terms of cash and food take has diminished. So the mobility at the household level would have increased, and that would have also meant a lot more health-related expenditure at the household level. And a little bit of cash crunch also was felt for education and for other social events, particularly marriages, which may not be a bad thing. I mean, cash crunch for getting marriage is not a very bad thing, perhaps. In the third round, again, we found that there are many households who reported that still they are short of cash. This is in spite of selling their Rabi produce and part of their Kharif produce to government or the open market. Even then, cash crunch situation was very much there. 58% of the respondents said that they could be falling short very soon of good items. 48% wanted to take credit on this. So these numbers are there, which really meant that households were fearing that they're going to run out of cash, and that would have impact on their food consumption, their agricultural operations, health, and all those things. And naturally, I mean, these are the last two slides I'll be coming to. When households do not have enough money at their disposal, cash crunch is happening, and banks are not able to provide credit, there's an overall loss of income and jobs. What do we expect people to do? People would be pawning their assets to get loans. And we got some evidence for that in our round 2. saying that 9%, the number is small, but the sample was quite large. So 9% would translate to something like 1,700 families or something, reported mortgaging one or more assets of their household for cash for security purpose. And highest incidence of this was in Jharkhand and Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh as well. And 63% of the households reported that they had to pawn ornaments, and there some people also reported that they had to pawn land as well, 27%, which is not a small percent. And this is all for getting loans for their own household level consumption, or for agricultural purposes, or for medicines and other related expenses. This was a situation in July 2020. In December 2020, somewhat a similar situation happened. Here also around 8 to 9% of the responding households told us that they had to mortgage one or more assets of their household for cash purpose. And the highest incidence again is in the same states, and the purpose is also not very different. And alarming 25% of the people reported that they had to mortgage land also. There's two slides which I had got missed out, I think, because it's too many slides here. One was about the impact of this thing, COVID crisis on children. In the third round, we did ask them about these online classes. Everybody is doing online classes. What is the impact of that on education? How did households look at it? And we got evidence that many of the households did not have a smartphone. And even if they had smartphone, they did not have money to give internet connection to their children for a very long time. So as a result, many children had to go, could not attend online classes. So online classes had taken a big hit in terms of educational investments. Education is also one of these long-term investments which will have consequences lasting over many months and years to come. So there is some evidence to show that probably online education is doing a lot of harm to children, as can be imagined. And we should be looking forward to a situation where that online education comes to a halt, so that our educational levels, which are already very, very poor educational outcomes, they are likely to worsen even further. And there was another slide on this gender impact, particularly on women's work, in the third round again, which showed that the burden on women had actually gone up. They had to do more, devote more time on managing households and old people, and taking care of cattle and so on. In summary, just the last slide of mine. The summary is the key messages which is coming out of survey. There are positive and negative messages. The negative thing is that there's been, all around it has been reported through the last 8 to 10 months of COVID in the places we surveyed, states and villages and blocks we surveyed. There's been reports of several job loss and income loss, and precarious population of like migrant labor had got severely affected. And NREGA is not providing a solution. We need solutions beyond MG NREGA. Household level, because of job loss and income loss, cash crunch has been very, very critical. And access to credit did not compensate for that. People had to either pawn their assets or go to informal markets to borrow at exorbitant rates of interest. So household level debt would have gone up. Cutting down on food, long-term investments in nutrition, education, all those things have affected very significantly. People had to cut down on food and reduce access to food. The policy conclusion of that would be that we need to strengthen our PDS a lot more. Large number of health issues have been reported. I have not covered them here, which is basically non-COVID health issues. So the focus was on COVID. The non-COVID diseases multiplied, and Anganwadis, everything was shut down. The child nutrition, the services that pregnant women would get, all of that has got severely affected, which again will have very long-term consequences. Impact on education, I just now mentioned. Gender aspects, I mentioned that. These are the negative kind of things, or the bleak scenario coming out of survey. But there are some positive messages as well. One positive message is what I mentioned already: an all-round revival of MGNREGA. The government did not have any other program, any other vehicle to reach out to mitigate rural distress at this scale. So MGNREGA came in handy, and wherever it has worked, it has helped households. We need to still find out how exactly households got help through MGNREGA, only jobs or something else. But definitely MGNREGA's revival has been a big news as part of the last 8 to 10 months, which we can report. And second is the robustness of the community institutions. Many of the SHG federations, SHGs, farmer producer companies, and Gram Panchayats, all of them have done exemplary work during the last 10, 11 months of the COVID crisis. And the robustness of the institutions has actually gone a long way to sort of mitigate the impact of the crisis. And by the same token, where community institutions are not strong, there the impact of COVID has been much more severe. And as one can imagine, it can last for a very long time. And last point, there is a role. I mean, government had made a lot of announcements. We had a stimulus package which is supposed to be running to so many trillions, but as you know, it's all basically supply side measures, demand side. There were not too many measures coming in. But even then, many government programs did not live up to their promise. But there were a few programs like MGNREGA and PDS to some extent, where the government's program did function well, and wherever they have functioned well, they did help local communities significantly. And this is the kind of overall message coming out of our survey, and looking forward to your comments. Thank you. I'll stop here. I'll stop my share.
So should we take up questions now?
Yeah, you can. I'm just
please
stopping the sharing, but I'm not able to get there.
Yes, sir. Please raise your hands for questions.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions? Ajay?
It was a very nice presentation, and nice aspects were also covered. Sir, I wanted to ask about the food consumption. As it was said that the food consumption was decreased by uh, in many aspects like vegetable oil.
Yeah.
So in that, whether the sample was same sample or it was also random, or the same samples was collected for the 3 rounds.
Yeah, that we are right now doing that analysis. In fact, as I said, there's a lot of overlap. We are trying to maintain some kind of a timeline also. But remember, this is all done by our own village community workers, etc. So they may be, that strictly they may not have been followed. So we are trying to look at our own data and try to organize it so that we try to isolate the blocks. Right now we got the figure. There are around 60 blocks had been repeated in 2 or 3 rounds of our surveys. And similar exercise we are doing for households also. So right now I'm not able to go in a position to respond to your question to say that whether the households report that which reported in the second round reduction of food intake, did they continue in the third round itself? I'm not able to respond it right now. But that's analysis we are doing right now. But in our, I think from just by looking at the responses, I think there would have been a lot of repeats, because there's a pattern in this impact. The low income groups, the vulnerable groups like tribals, many of them are getting very severely impacted by this crisis. So I would imagine that there are many households who continue to be in that situation. So exact number I will not be able to put it to you right now. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, about Paresh had asked about survey instrument. Paresh, we had a research coordinator. I think he'll be able to give the answer better. Or Ved, I can request Ved also. But this survey CTO is an online tool, which can be used in mobile also. It's like a spreadsheet kind of thing. It's a very simple thing. Earlier we tried with an instrument called Kobo, which is again an online tool which has come. So we found that Kobo had certain problems of dealing with large data, etc. But the survey CTO, the form could be like, for example, our format initially questionnaire was done in English. Then we translate to Hindi. Then we sent to people like Ashwini who translated to Marathi. So in that format, the questionnaire could be put onto their mobile phones. So when you're talking to the person, interviewing a person, you can mark your response on the mobile phone itself. You can keep ticking it. So automatically the data will get uploaded. It has an offline feature also. The data gets stored offline. And when you go there and connect it to internet, the data gets automatically uploaded. And once the data is uploaded, also that analysis also happens very fast. And what people call, the research coordinator called data cleaning. Normally, imagine collecting the data in sheets or something like that, transferring them, then cleaning them. It will take a lot of time. But the survey instruments are actually making the work a lot easier. So Survey CTO is a very easily manageable tool, which can be transferred onto a mobile phone, which I think mobile phone, all our people have smartphone, many of our community resource persons have. With that, they're able to do survey and tabulation of data simultaneously. It's an online tool. I think most of it is free also. You can download it and check it. Yeah. And if any of you are planning to do the survey, I would request you to do the same thing. We can talk to our research team also, the survey team also. They'll be able to tell you much better that if you are able to collect information, etc. Yeah. So, Ved, you can say something about the research process. I mean, how the data collection has been done. Yeah.
Just a couple of comments. One to Ajay, Mr. Ajay Pawar's question that what we did was, it's a very, very good question. And I just want to add, once we saw these numbers, which are shocking numbers in terms of cutting down on food, etc. And if you go further down, cutting down on vegetables, nutrition part of the food. We actually wrote an article in the Times, in the Hindustan Times, recommending to the government that they should provide food, this free ration beyond November also. Initially, it was 3 months, and then government said we'll give it up to November. Our recommendation to the government was that they should continue till March. And therefore, Viju, the question that Mr. Pamar is asking is relevant to see what was really happening in November, December, November also. Are people still suffering and government has now stopped providing? So I think the vulnerability, the precarity of the migrants is on one side, but the vulnerability, precarity of the people who are not migrants but cutting down on food is a very, very, I mean, sadly an important question to find answers for. And I think that is important. Let's keep it on and see what we get out of it. Even if it's not first round, as you keep saying, second and third round, let us find. If it is not consistent first round, anyway, they were going back at that time. They had just been, that unlockdown had been announced. So I think the important thing is what was happening, maybe a cumulative effect or maybe some amelioration had happening by that time. Maybe probably people would have sold their kharif crop, maybe they're better off. We don't know. So I think this December data, A, can be standalone. B, it can be also compared with round 2. As far as is cutting down on food and even pawning of asset. Whatever the precariousness of the rural population concerned is a very important thing to actually track. And we will be doing this in December, in April or May, this next round. So let us see what we get and make accordingly recommendations, because government has not made more allocations for Narega. They have same 60,000 crores, not 1 lakh crore they made last year. So my plea, so that is anyway. Second is this research process. I don't want to take too much time, it will be very boring. If I had the time, I would have shown to Mr. Paresh the sheet that comes together for a particular NGO. Suppose we have 100 respondents, then how the data gets tabulated. The reason I'm sharing that is because what is important in RCRC, we are able to do it through the partners, through the member organizations across the country, 11, 12, 15 states. But for Survey CTO instrument, we wouldn't have been able to do, and which allows the enumerator. Every organization will have one or more enumerators to record the response on the phone. And that is why a large sample size is possible. And even data cleaning is possible because of Survey CTO, because data gets recorded there. So coming to the overall, there are 3-4 steps in the research process. One, what are the questions to be asked and convert into hypotheses, and from hypothesis we convert into questions to be asked, and then we finalize the questions, of course, and then those questions will have multiple choices, multiple answers that gets coded, and that gets converted into a particular HTML format for it to be recorded on the phone. So that survey CTO does that. Then data cleaning happens, because sometimes, to give you an example, name may be male but recorded as female. So there are inconsistencies in the data, which means data cleaning is important. Same thing can happen with social composition. We are cleaning the data. We means our team is cleaning the data. From the last name, you can figure out that this person belongs to a particular social category, maybe OBC, but somewhere somebody has clicked it as ST. So that kind of cleaning also happens. And then there are other checks we are going to also build into the questions, so that survey the inconsistencies can be weeded out. And I just want to say here, on the research team's behalf, data cleaning is it's been a problem, or it's been a lot of work, I would say. So going forward, we're going to put a lot more emphasis on data quality, which means training our enumerators ahead of time and then recording so last mile data collection, last mile of the data collection and data quality is going to be important, particularly of the decentralized nature of the whole RCRC exercise. So strength can actually turn into weakness unless we do that at the last mile. And once that data cleaning happens, then we put together the graphs and tables, and the results we presented, Viju presented that. And then, of course, we have to do the narrative of the report. We have to still write what Viju was saying, to convert into a written report. So it can be digested both by the NGOs to improve their program, as well as for the policymakers. I just want to make the last point that to go to the policymaker is a treacherous exercise. If you do only red flags, they will throw you out of the room. They will not allow you, give you a gate pass to get into secretariat. So it's important, and you senior people here would know that. But otherwise also, I would say re-emphasize that not only NREGA is revived, there are surprises. PM Kisan Samman has worked better than I expected. Jandan Yojana is better than I expected. So one can be a severe critic and forever we can be cynical about the government. I think some of the programs of the government actually have fared very well. And this I am saying, initially it was difficult for the government to respond across the country. But I think wo samal gaye after May, June. They put in a lot of emphasis, and therefore NREGA improved, PDS also improved. By the time it came to July, etc., I think things improved much more. Our bureaucratic machinery did respond, I think, admirably, I should. And yet at the same time, there are a lot of issues, which is what our survey is highlighting. So I'll stop here. And if Ashwini, you want to say something, please come. Yeah.
Ashwini, would you like to add something?
No, I just wrote one sentence about how enumerators were
trained. Okay, you can probably answer that. Yeah.
I've done that. Okay. So first we were trained as people in the organization. That was done with the English questionnaire and in English. And later within the organizations, we took up the local language questionnaire and trained the enumerators, which were the CRPs.
And I would also like to add that this year the training has become a capacity building, at least for my own organization, because people who try to do survey CTO and COBO, etc., have become very familiar with that in our organization, and we are now using it for our own program monitoring, for our own surveys and so on. I mean, about a week ago, they covered some 38 villages. They did PRA in 38 villages. For this, they particularly used this survey instrument, which was very useful. So training happens like that. We in each organization, each of the partner organizations, we ask them to nominate one person who will be the research coordinator, and that person, he or she, will have to continue throughout the through the rounds. And our survey team interacts with that person and tells them first about a survey to the instrument. That's the first round. After that, you run through the questionnaire and the specific ways the questions are posed. As you know, there are a lot of things lost in translation. Jo bolte hain. वो काफी होता है. इंग्लिश में, हिंदी में होते होते मराठी में पहुंच जाएंगे, तब तक क्वेश्चन का पूरा मतलब ही चेंज हो सकता है. The whole meaning can change and something else can happen. So not only the wording of the question, how you ask the question, that is also very important. So उसमें भी थोड़ा we'll try to, our research coordinator tries to train the local research coordinators of the NGOs, and that leads to some capacity building of that type. Yeah. Yeah.
You want to answer the question that Mr. Anand Rao has asked?
Yeah, data quality. This is what we are largely. I mean, in fact, Ved also will agree. This is the main issue that constantly comes up to our in our discussions. Key data we are collecting, as I told you, sample is guided by presence of our partners. So in a way, it's a biased or a purposive sampling. And we try to maintain a timeline. But again, if you ask me, how many households have been timelined and carried forward, I mean, we need to really look at that. We didn't have this unique ID. Those kind of things we did not put in place in the beginning. So those questions are difficult. So data quality things will be difficult, and a lot of data quality is also because of the loss in translation type of thing. You are asking a question in English, when it is translated into local language, it becomes something else. And enumerator is asking some question, and it's not properly conveyed. At times we get wrong responses also, and sometimes the responses are completely blatantly wrong. For example, you ask question about ownership of land, the person says, I don't have land. Then if you ask some other question, he says, I got Kisan Samman. Now, if you don't have land, by definition, you cannot get Kisan Samman. So there'll be a lot of contradictory kind of thing within the data also. That's all part of the data cleaning, apart from the more blatant kind of things what Ved mentioned about name being like something, you know, some female name, but the gender is, the sex, it is marked as male or something. So those kind of issues are there in data quality. So going forward, one suggestion we have got from our the kind of group that we work with, research support group, that we this thing is that we develop a kind of a panel of respondents. You know, we do select the kind of respondents that we are going to and make them into a panel of respondents that we will be surveying every three months. So you have a set of 111,000 or 12,000 kind of families who will be uniquely coded. You will use that census code type of thing, state, district, block, numerical kind of code we'll use for each family, unique ID, and go back to that family again and again. So that is what the strategy we thought. That way our sample will be defined and the timeline will be maintained, and we'll be going back to same people and same type of questions will be asked. So there won't be too much of this loss in translation may not happen that much. But having said that, the downside of that is that creates a kind of what you can call an observer bias. See, as I mentioned, we are all NGOs. We are working with our community people. And if I observe something in our area through my survey, or my organization, my people will not sit quiet about it. They'll do something about it. So the presence of the observer, who is not a researcher, who is actually somebody working in the grassroots, can affect data quality in other ways. So there are pluses and minuses. That you strengthen data quality in one side, it may go bad on the other side. But on the balance, this is going forward. This is the kind of thing that we are trying to think about, and we would really like the inputs of people at CTARA, the researchers here, senior people like Narayanan and Narendrashah and others. All your inputs are required, and the students also. The kind of how to make this sample better. And as Ved mentioned, we'll be again doing this research in April. So if any of you are interested in participating and taking it forward in your own areas, wanting to do it in your own this thing, we are happy to work with you. And our team is there, research team is there. They'll help you with the survey instrument and all the data requirements. Yeah.
So we have one last question from Sharon.
Yeah. What is the question?
Hi, sir. Thank you for the presentation. Really insightful.
Yeah.
I am basically, first of all, I like to say your point, you know, what you mentioned about this model, this RCRC collision, serving as sort of like a blueprint for, you know, how to approach crisis and our collective response, and also like for future crisis. I just want to ask, because we're also nearing completion, we are also talking about a final next survey, and it will bring a whole, you know, 360 perspective, and it's almost over 1 year we are doing this. And so how do we continue this? And when we talk about, you know, challenges on the field or the data triangulation or cleaning the data, and how can we continue this as, crisis or no crisis? How can the sector and us work more collectively? I mean, any misses, anything that, we can do differently going forward? That is what my thought process
Yeah.
is.
Exactly. That's a good question. That also is related to what we mentioned in the very opening slide. I had mentioned this thing, CMRE, Center for Monitoring Rural Economy.
Right.
That is the dream of Mr. Bedaria, that he wants the research to be institutionalized in some form. I mean, right now, it came up very spontaneously. Actually, it came out, I think, you would recollect, actually, you'd also recollect, it came up through a question. Somebody asked a random question. Is Jansan working in your area? This is probably 1 or 2 months into lockdown, 1 month into lockdown. So we did some studies. Ujala scheme is working. How many people have got benefit? So we randomly did some exploration. From this idea came up, why don't we do a systematic survey just to find out? Many other people were doing it that time. That's how the idea came up. And the second round followed and the third followed. Now we have reached a stage where we know the limitations of the data. We know the kind of issues which come up. The researchers, typically the kind of questions people like you will ask about sampling and bias and so on. Having known all that, can we convert this research into some institutional form? Can we think of it as some kind of a center or something which regularly generates information? That's why the CMI in parallel, CMI produces reports. So in a way, RCRC can go much beyond, because the information outreach will be much deeper. So we can actually come up with this thing. So ideally, what we can do is that we can convert some of these things into indicators on which regularly we survey. And we have a panel of respondents who we go back to and collect evidence from them and make into a systematic kind of effort going forward. So institutionalizing the research is exactly what we are thinking of for the future.
Can I add to that to answer Sharan's question? Thank you, Sharan, for coming, and you can speak on both sides, on our side as well as on the other side. So, Sharan, for the benefit of the colleagues here present, she is a partner in RCRC and she represents AENH Foundation. So just to take this thing forward for the benefit, what do we gain by continuously surveying? So take the simplest of scheme, Sharan, Ujjwala. So if you track Ujjwala every 3 months or so, what we will get, okay, cylinder connection was given, but what people buying the cylinders refill or not, and what percentage of women initially were very proud to own in the rural areas, rural women very are proud to own a gas cylinder connection like their urban counterparts, urban women. Now, what is their feeling or their response or the acceptance or the performance of the Ujjwala scheme? Now, instead of government asking this, we continuously do this. Every 3 months, what percent of women are able to put out money? What is the cost of transport going and buying, getting a cylinder, and do it? Then you can also do it for stratified sampling. People below 2,500 rupees per month. People from below 5,000 rupees per month, which is a kind of poverty line. That means those who earn 60,000 rupees a year, below that, or those who. So does the performance of Ujjwala scheme vary depending on the income class and depending on the caste and depending on the women or depending on the nearby villages from the road or from remote or far off from the. So reason why are we going to do it? Because government doesn't have a system of tracking every scheme. Government has this SECC data, which was done in 2011-12, and I still remember. Once I went to Masuri Academy, so Mr. Amarjit Sinha was presenting SECC well before he became as Secretary RD. So this is the only data. This is one set of data that is collected. That too very infrequently. NSS data infrequent. NFSS data does not cover all the aspects. So that is why if we do it systematically, we can give feedback to Yogi government in UP and to the central government that this is how, and this is across the country. This is across the country. So if we take care of the sampling, methodology, rigor, everything, this can become like Acer in.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Can become like Acer. in education.
Right.
That is the idea of institutionalizing this regular survey to inform. And if you want to do the NGO from ENH, you can say, this is what we can say more forcefully if you have data. Otherwise, you will go with some story, some woman is not getting, they will dismiss it. You came up with the story. So here, ENH or any NGO member of the RCRC will go with data. Data for that district, you can go to the collector, you can go for that state, and you can go for the whole country. And that will, we can raise issues, but without raising issues without data, government is very likely going to dismiss you. And that is the weaponizing the RCRC members is the primary goal of doing this institutionalization.
Yeah. So that's what I think is a kind of a broad agenda for that 1 year to come. I mean, if we get support from somewhere, try to institutionalize it and do this regularly, and also convert this into a kind of a capacity building of the partners, the research coordinators. I mean, somebody asked a question, how is it trained? I mean, once they train, they become a resource. Actually, our research team is expanding. One can look at it that way. So you are creating capacity in the local NGOs, in the local, our partners, to raise issues, kind of problem solving at the local level, and conducting surveys and doing some research at their own level. So research can become a lot more decentralized also once it is institutionalized in this fashion. That is, I think, the way to go. This is what will be trying, at least for the agenda that we have set for ourselves for the next 1 year, is something similar to this.
One last question, Viju, which people are asking, any solution? And you know the solution is, of course, we are talking about institutions are the solution for future pandemic.
Right.
You can answer Mr. Kuldeep Kumar's question also.
Yeah.
And
how many? The main thing is that you have to. I mean, the broad message what we have got is that government programs are also working. But if you actually map the NREGA performance to presence of community institutions, you'll find a lot of overlap there also. So I think the supporting and strengthening community institutions, either federations or producer companies or panchayats, whatever, or forest committees at the ground level, that's the only way one can. Only way out of crisis like this. Supposing one more crisis happens, that's the only way we can tide over the difficulties. Strengthening community institutions, that's the only way forward, I think. Empowerment of community institutions. There's also a question from Paresh with how many partners were involved in this exercise. The numbers are there: 46 partners in the first round and second round, and 43 in the third round. RCRC has around 66 partners, but all of them were not able to participate. So something like around 45 partners are regularly there. And the partners are also more or less the same, the people who come repeatedly. And I would also put it on record that we are actually surprised by the enthusiasm shown by them. And all this is done without any funding. Okay, absolutely no money is given to either research coordinators or the surveyors. They are doing it out of their own interest, and there is no funding donor relationship between the RCRC and the partner. They are doing it on their own interest. And that is what has sustained the effort so far. And it's been largely a voluntary kind of effort. And we also look forward to cooperation from students like you. There are lots of students present here, I can imagine, or people who are in CTARA. And all of you are from rural areas also. So if you also may be interested in knowing how this crisis unfolds there, so we can work together and develop more such insights into rural area. That was the primary purpose of this interaction anyway, the way we, I talked to Dr. Narayanan, that was the primary purpose of this. Yeah. So I think we can close right now if there are no questions. Our emails are with Sudha and Dr. Narayanan and others. So you can correspond to us anytime. Drop a mail either to Ved or me. Ved is also known, and Ashwini is sitting very close to you anyway. So yes.
Yeah,
Over to you, NC.
I think I have to kind of formally thank you. And it's great that three of you actually came together, friends of CTARA. I think Ved has been here, although we didn't respond so nicely back, but the Buddha Fellowship, I think we should again kind of get into that. And of course, Viju, multiple years we have put in our 609 fieldwork students there. We have benefited a lot from you. And also in 1 year, I think we have sent it to Pragati Abhiyan also. Yeah. We did a comparative study on MG-Narega. So one of my questions is that, at that time, what we found was that there was a there's some kind of governance failure also for planning this, so it was not just demand. Your study has brought out that, there is demand has increased. But was it a demand issue or also a kind of planning issue that was there, capacity at the panchayat level and at the level of bureaucracy? And if that was there, how, so did government respond, or, how was that gap actually filled up?
Yeah. I think Ashwini will be able to answer this, Ashwini.
Demand was hugely increased during that time.
Actually, your voice not clear.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So demand had increased immediately after the lockdown was lifted, May, June onwards. But for two reasons, the local governments were not prepared. One was they were short of staff. At least in Maharashtra and even in other places, we had seen that not all offices were working at 100% capacity of what they had. So actually, there are vacancies. There are people on contract. There are people who are not so trained. And on top of all that, not all of them are coming to office. That was one thing. Secondly, the Gram Rozgar Sevak, or the equivalent of that, the field assistants in the villages who help people to respond to the demand and start works and take attendance and all, did not have the transport to go to the block office and come back. So these were very serious issues and obstacles that hampered smooth functioning of NREJ on the ground. Planning was, of course, a problem, and that is what has led to more of individual schemes rather than community schemes. But the kind of demand that came in made the local government to start community works. They had to, because there was so much of demand and which cannot be absorbed by all those individual works. Now, so we see that there are more of water storage structures and roads because that was started with not much of planning in hand. And so this year we have seen a lot of surge in NREGA, but also a lot of lessons to understand how it can respond to such widespread disaster in terms of planning. And now, see, we are in the third week of March, but already we have surpassed the 1 lakh crore that was given. Right? And like Ved said, for next year, we again have only 60 lakh crores. Now, this is not going to be sufficient. The third problem was the financial crunch. The cash flows that were supposed to come from Delhi to the state were very ad hoc, and that also hampered starting of works and continuation of works at the ground level. So, in spite of all this, we have already utilized more than 1 lakh crores. That shows the need for this. Like what Viju showed as our data. Look at the almost 40% of the families saying cutting down on food. Now let's just do minus ration, minus Narega in these families. What are we doing? Yeah. So this shows the shocking but not so surprising scenario to us.
So I think there's an opportunity there to kind of, in this network to kind of learn from each other, especially the MG Narega one, so because I see the most, the most important part as the precarity of labor that has increased, and then one answer is MG Narega. And you already have a network of, MG Narega NGOs working, under SPS and, so I think that could be one conversation that can happen in this network. Yeah. So as Ved was telling, this evidence can actually bring in a network, and this network can bring in some kind of an advocacy possibility, because there is clear evidence that is there. So that linkage is what I think one possibility to kind of move forward. So I think the process matters a lot rather than this, product questions that we are asking about methodology and all. And that should surely improve, I think, over a period of time. And the good thing about the process is that, it's basically the primary stakeholders, the people who are working on the ground that is actually collecting the data. Yeah. But one suggestion can be, if some academic institutions also can pitch in. I'm not telling about IIT and those kinds of institutions. But if there are local institutions that each NGO can actually look into, that can also be another way of capacity building of students understanding what to do. One thing that we were thinking about at that time was a protocol for MGNREGA activities. If we can make that, it becomes a template, so that every year I think that can be replicated. So you don't need capacity then every year. I think that is one possibility which can be actually looked forward. And this is a clear improvement from the May that first round that we discussed. That presentation also.
You were there. You heard the presentation. Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting. This monitoring can be a very interesting idea, which we should also be kind of taken.
Yeah.
So
outside this thing, I mean, part of the Energy Consortium Network, we are currently doing a study with Ashwini is part of it. We are also talking to Amit Basole. They are they'll be there in designing the study, which is specifically focused on the role of NREGA during this time, and many of our partners will be surveyed as part of that. And also looking at the quality of assets, where I think you are planning and execution. I think there's a huge problem even now. Even though large amount of work has been created, the planning process has not been adequate. So the quality of assets, I think, are likely to be weak. That fact we are going to capture through another survey, which is going to be a longish survey. One organization from Delhi, CORD, they are also involved in it. And Amit Basole from Asim Premji University will be there. And actually, and people like that are there. So we have formed a kind of a group around to do this survey. So your inputs also will be quite welcome that. And on part of RCRC coalition also, like we want people like you to come and sort of discuss this data and methodology, etc. The kind of questions which are usually thrown to us. Right now, we are working with some people in IIM Ahmedabad. Mr. Ankur Sarin and other people are helping us there. We also had discussion with people like Sonalji Desai and Richa Govind, etc. So people like you at CTARA, IIT Mumbai, people, if you also participate in the research, I mean, how to make the methodology better so that more good results come out. I think there'll be a good collaboration. So part of the...
at some point you can come with the data also and, kind of show the students. So if somebody gets interested, they can actually kind of start crunching it. And, I think that's another possibility that is there.
Yeah, this was a kind of hidden agenda. We wanted to draw you into this RCRC's research work. That is our own hidden agenda we had. I mean, that also we can think about. Yeah.
So thanks a lot for coming. And I think Ved is telling something.
Yeah, Professor Narayanan. Yeah, of course. I still remember the cup of tea we had in the restaurant there. We have to return to Buddha Fellowship for sure. But this one is very exciting if we can get you also to work with us, improve the methodology. And
I think there are other people also, who work with data and all. So there is a lab called Rudra, which actually kind of looks at big data and all, Professor Penanjina Swami. And others are also, there's a nutrition group, Professor Adisha Agnihotri, Professor Amit Arora, Professor Narendrashah, so that the whole nutrition data can be strengthened with that. And
it is important then. I think because one is a special expertise. The other reason, when we go for advocacy, as you were saying, of course we use the might of the network, but the numbers not enough if the rigor is not below is above certain minimum bar. Otherwise they will shoot the messenger. You don't know research itself. Particularly if the truth we bring out is unpalatable.
That's right.
So we I think it is very
that has to be tactically put in.
Yes. And I also agree with your other idea, and it actually aligns with what Rukmini Banerjee also told us, who is also happy to come on board to share her lessons of research. She said, let me say, in local academic institutions, if we can also partner, and their students will be a great thing. Like in Lucknow, we can find somebody. In Patna, the big man is gone, but we can still find somebody there. So like that, I think it's a good thing to Also, they will have their own way to work with the government. So I think it's important to rope in local academic institutions. That is
because
very
we also have worked with this ODK Collect, this app, and that actually really interests students, because that's a toy that they carry with them, and they like to play with it. So that could be one way to kind of introduce them, and then we have a lot of ready-made data collectors also.
Yeah.
So that's the advantage that we get.
Yes. Yeah.
And then education becomes real world.
This is going to be, let's explore it offline, and that would be
okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I invite Professor Anand Rao for the closing remarks.
Oh, okay. Thanks once again, Ved, Mr. Vijay Shankar, as well as Ashwini ji, for taking out time and telling us about this important survey and the findings about that. Actually, as we're speaking about 609, and INSEE would also agree. So this year, since our 609 is being offered in somewhat alternative way, if there is some kind of a data that is already collected from this survey and some analysis of that survey data is to be done, I think that could be packaged as a assignment for our students to work on, because they will have to do such assignment for 2 months of a desk work. So I think maybe INSEE and Pennan or Pankaj, I mean, whoever is interested in this kind of a thing and they can guide these students, maybe you can explore that possibility as well, because this will just begin in a couple of, few weeks from now. It will be from April to June. Our students will have to do something like this. So maybe this would be a one immediate concrete possibility that our students can get on with this kind of analysis of this already collected data. If some of the students are interested, they can also participate in the next rounds of data collection also as part of the 609. So that also.
And you can also design very small kind of survey, need not be so comprehensive. You can focus on any one particular aspect,
so,
like
because they have to, they will be going to one specific location and then try to either do some kind of a
So Anand, that is we can do this if you go to assign a couple of students or whatever number to a particular organization. So the data collected there, then you can go to say ENH Foundation, Sharan has come from there. So they associate with the specificity, specific location, context of the data, then the interpretation we are giving, they can come up with their own interpretation, they'll get more deeper into the whole exercise. So that might be one way to engage the student, because a student can do abstract analysis, but they would like to also know where this data came from, who are the set of people, which kind of population are we talking about? Is it tribal, non-tribal? Is it UP or Odisha? So that is one way to sort of engage them and give them interesting assignments. I'm just thinking aloud.
Yes.
This is the right suggestion.
Yeah, only thing in the current pandemic situation, we are just proposing this alternative to our regular 609 that you are familiar with, such an opportunity to do only a desk work where the data is already collected and then work with the data. For them, it would be like a secondary data to analyze.
You can talk to the team and the staff.
Yes.
So we began going back with this survey results to individual organizations.
Correct.
So like that, they can talk to the staff on Zoom, and then.
That's right. Yeah, now there are various ways to connect, and then.
Even the survey was largely done online,
or explored at least.
Yeah, first round of survey was done entirely online. So there are ways of working now. Even desk work can be, organized that way. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So let's hope that few students will get inspired to do this kind of a contribution to this and learn out of this whole exercise as well. So that is the most important part. So thank you so much again, and we hope that when the situation changes and time permits, we can have physical visit of you to CTARA, and all of us can benefit from your experiences.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.